Focus on the metrics because the metrics tell the story of where the app is. What's the app store rating? What's the crash rate? How many users do you have? What's your MAUs? Focus on the data because people will take it personally. When you're responsible for the entire app, it's like everybody's interests are competing to make sure that nobody overlaps too much or the interests don't go against the overall quality of the app. And unfortunately, a lot of times you have feature teams that are more aggressive or maybe more publicly visible, so they get more attention and more priority. But ultimately, when you're running the platform, it's like you're responsible for the app itself.
Welcome to Tech Council, your go-to podcast for mastering the art of building in the enterprise world. Join hosts Duncan Mapes and Jason Emke as they unpack the strategies, tools, and insights you need to drive innovation at scale. Brought to you by DevGrid, we're here to empower developers, tech leaders, and enterprise builders. Hit subscribe, and let's dive into today's episode. We're up. I'm excited. Great. Unfortunately, our good friend Jason Emke is on a boat somewhere right now, so he's having more fun.
Poor guy.
But
on vacation.
But we miss him. But
yeah.
So I went to the I don't know how to say it, but I went to the bench and pulled out one of my favorite people. Really excited to welcome Chris Boyd onto the DevGrid podcast. We are going to talk about mobile and a bunch of other stuff today. And kind of just quickly to introduce Chris, we've worked together in the past. He ran a mobile platform team for me at a large bank and has since gone on to do the same thing in multiple other places and has a cool story and has done a lot of cool stuff in his life. So, and he's just a fun guy and love to talk shop with him. So thought it'd be a great time to have him on and, really excited to have you here, bud. Thanks for taking the time.
You're too kind. Thanks for having me on. It's great. We've been talking about this for a long time.
First person that's ever accused me of being too kind. So, all right.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
All
so
right. Let's do it.
We mentioned you ran a mobile dev team. Like before that though, right? Like you were doing, I think when we pulled you off the street, you had been running a mobile dev consultancy, right?
Yep.
Is my memory correct?
For 10 years. Yeah. Started in New Orleans, 2012. It was awesome. If you had an idea, if your company needed an app, if, you wanted to kind of do an MVP for a startup, we were your team. Had a lot of success, a lot of really great stuff. Apps for like Houston Zoo, Marriott hotels. We did an internal app for them. Tulane University. I think I launched over 100 apps into the App Store at least. So it was a lot of fun. Cool. And over those 10 years, the industry changed a lot, right? Like we went from Objective-C to Swift, Java to Kotlin, all sorts of stuff in mobile. It's ever changing. So you have to kind of stay on top of it. And then I'm sure we'll get into it, but like with React Native, that was something that came in and totally changed the industry again, right?
Yeah. So your trajectory there, you said 2012. So then I think when did we start working together? Like 21, 22, somewhere in there?
22.
Yep. Yeah. And so, so you had 10 years of just not solo, but like small dev shop dedicated to mobile. Like, did you guys do anything but mobile or was all just mobile shop?
Initially, we only did iOS. Like we didn't even do Android.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that was the play. It was just like native mobile development.
Cool.
And then as things grew, just because I had a background in like enterprise web development, we would end up doing like a dashboard for every client, right?
Yeah.
So they have, dashboard, they can kind of sign in and see their content, manage their users, that kind of thing. But then typically what would happen is they liked the dashboard so much that they would have us do features that were like web only for that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, it grew into all sorts of stuff.
You did a little full stack, but it was basically all in support of the mobile stuff. You were just a mobile shop. It was
always like, there was never not a mobile app involved in the project, for sure.
Sweet. Very cool. So you're going from, you're running a large team of just dedicated mobile guys, jumping in and out of projects for external clients. And then you come to work with me and I'm like, hey, I need you to run this mobile platform team. Right.
Right.
So like,
which is
what is
pretty
that
natural
like?
transition, right? Like,
Yeah. So like, what was that like going from, and like talk about like what you did on the team and like what going from owning delivery to owning the platform, like what's that
yeah,
like?
it's a big shift, but it was a natural transition for me because, you know, what we were doing at that job was very similar to kind of when you're trying to manage a team of developers that are working on different things, all on mobile projects, shifting over to running the core platform mobile team, where you're not necessarily developing features, but you're developing the frameworks and the integrations and the support and doing the submission and the releases and all that kind of stuff. So that was all stuff that we did at Aptitude anyway.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a natural transition of managing a bunch of apps in the App Store, managing the releases around that, managing framework integrations, developing custom modules for the apps. You know, that all kind of fell onto that team. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of overlap. And it was a really great team. It was really great working for you. It was awesome.
Yeah. Cool. So what do you think is the biggest mindset shift necessary when you go from either a mixed role like you had where you have business delivery and call it ops delivery to now you no longer having to worry about business delivery directly. Now you're in this platform engineering space where obviously you have a lot of ops responsibility. You have a lot of accountability, but not necessarily responsibility, right? Like if the app sucks, you're going to have some accountability, even if you're not the ones that are doing it, right? So how do you like from a leadership standpoint, how do you approach that type of thing? If you got somebody out there who's maybe stepping into a horizontal role like that, what kind of advice would you give them? What are some tips and tricks to kind of look for?
Focus on the metrics because the metrics tell the story of where the app is. What's the app store rating? What's the crash rate? How many users do you have? What's your MAUs? Focus on the data because people will take it personally. Every feature team, I think, kind of has their, you know, their baby that they're working on, rightly so, right? Like, you know, you're in love with the project that you're working on for the feature. But when you're responsible for the entire app, it's like everybody's interests are competing and you're having to play like both traffic cop and, you know, make sure that nobody kind of overlaps too much or the interests don't go against the overall quality of the app. And unfortunately, a lot of times you have feature teams that are more aggressive or maybe more publicly visible, so they get more attention and more priority. But ultimately, when you're running the platform, it's like you're responsible for the app itself.
Yeah. So I'm going to tee you up because obviously I was there, but like, tell me a story about how you have to shift. Like, what's a dramatic way to maybe shift that story, right? Like when you can't get people to take something seriously because, to your point, they're trying to get something out the door. They don't care about your problem because it's not their problem. Like, what are some things that you do? What, you know, beyond just the obvious, go talk to them, have a conversation. What are some mechanisms that you've used in the past to kind of help force the issue?
Yeah, I think one of the things we did very early on, I think within like a month of me starting, was we had such a horrendous crash rate with that app that we asked to pause all development. And just focus on bug fixing, right? And I think that was shocking to a lot of people. It was shocking that product went along with it. It was, you know, we had air cover with leadership. That was huge, you know, because the leadership saying like, hey, this is bad enough that we're going to pause and say, we're going to focus on bug fixing until the crash rate goes down to an acceptable level. I don't think a lot of people have the courage to do that kind of thing. But that was what was great about working with you and others that you.
So let's talk about that, right? You're about to say something nice and makes me uncomfortable. So, you know, like that was a really interesting time, right? Like obviously there were problems. You know, it wasn't one of those things where
3% crash rate, 3% of all app sessions were ending in a crash, right?
Yeah. So that was bad, right? Like what was our, when I think we set KPIs later on, like what was our green zone was something like 0.5% or something like that. Is that where we were?
It was 0.25%.
Quarter of a percent.
Quarter of a percent. Yeah.
Yeah. It was our green zone. And we were what, like 10x over that almost.
Yeah.
Or more than 10x, I guess. And
Over 10x,
so,
yeah.
yeah, so it was, I mean, it wasn't great, right? Like, and I think, the cool thing is, and the reason I sort of prodded you to bring that up, it was extremely unpopular. Like you and I were burned in effigy, I believe, a couple of times, right? Like it was
At least a couple. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, for that particular event, I mean, and you'll probably mobile engineers, especially native mobile engineers, are a particular breed, right? They have a certain sensibility to them that didn't care for us saying, actually, your app's a steaming pile of garbage. You're not allowed to ship anything until you fix it. Right.
Right.
I mean,
Well, and that's
and
an
that
interesting
was,
point about native developers, right? Like, I think you work so hard to become a native developer that there is a certain amount of pride in just having learned, like back in the day with Objective C, like it was a pain in the ass to write apps. So you get that kind of confidence from like, oh, I actually mastered this, right? Like
yeah.
you used to have to do memory allocation in an app with Objective C. And when I started Aptitude, that was how it was. Like, and that was, when an app crashed, it was usually because you screwed up the memory allocation. So there is a bit of, but you're right, there's a bit of ego there, but I think it comes from having had to work so hard
Yeah.
to get to that point, right?
Yeah. We'll talk about that more once we get into the React stuff. But I think, the other thing to point out is like you said, like the business or the product side was on board, right? Like, we have a lot of conversations on this podcast, about, how do you navigate an organization? And I think one of the things that we, whether it was our leadership or us or however, we certainly learned and realized in that situation, actually, if you frame it right for the business, they were thrilled that we were willing to take that step, right? Like it wasn't one of those where we had to twist their arm to get the support. It was, here's the situation. Your customers aren't crazy. That we found the metrics. Because the part of it was we found new data, right? Like we implemented new tools and gave us new data that caused us to realize how bad things were. But we've been getting, voice of customers for a long time, but so we can't replicate
fire,
it.
but you didn't know how bad the fire was, right?
Yeah. So then once we had data, we could show it to the partners. They were like, yes, please. This sounds like a good, the business was happy that action was being taken. Right, that there was proactive, or maybe not proactive, but at least intentional action was being taken. So, but yeah, I mean, and I think it's one of those times where, like, generally speaking, I'm very much a fan of decentralized decision making as much as possible. Right, like I don't like authoritarian regimes in general, whether it's politics or organizations. But sometimes you need it, right? Like sometimes it's a war zone, and you got to declare martial law. And then I think what happened was in that situation, which was obviously, like we said, very unpopular, but I think it didn't last very long either, right? Like it was maybe not even a month or a month and a half.
6 weeks later, we had it like to the green level, but within like 2 weeks, we were doing weekly releases. Within 2 weeks, we had, the major stuff resolved. And then within 6 weeks, it was down to, below 0.5%, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's a testament to that culture, and that's one of the best cultures I've ever seen, is where you had a lot of people that were, one, confident, two, cool, and three, all got along really well, right?
Yeah.
At least in the leadership structure and where we were in the arena that we were working. And you don't have a lot of that where people are that good at what they're doing and that courageous to be like, hey, this is a big deal. We're going to pause on that and go to product and say like, hey, we have to actually like not do what you need us to do for a month so we can get this cleaned up. I don't think a lot of people, especially in corporate America, have the courage to be able to make statements like that and be that transparent. But to your point about authority and decentralization, I mean, that's kind of how you run your teams and your shop, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing, I'll come back to what you were saying before, but like, I think the thing that was nice was we very quickly reduced the intensity of that as quickly as we could, right? And so,
Yep.
and that actually, I think, got a lot of credibility for a lot of the other changes that you needed to make later on, because people realized that, yeah, you might, go to the whip hand when needed, but you're only going to do it if it's absolutely necessary. You're not just some tyrant that's just running around trying to control everything. And so, sometimes those hard situations can build up a lot of credibility, because, when it's drastic, people see how you actually behave. Right. And,
Right.
to your point about people having courage, the funny thing is like, I've seen it over and over again. Everyone's scared of looking bad. Everyone's scared of, we can't call out it being
Right.
bad because then I look bad as the leader or whatever.
Right. But then you get this like, everybody's, it's emperor has no clothes kind of thing, where people are pretending like the app is good, but it's clearly struggling, right?
I don't
But nobody wants
understand
to
where
say
that comes
anything.
from. I don't understand where it comes from in technology, right? Like, I understand how it happens in other parts of the organizations and things like that. But like in technology, where it's so objective, often at least, it's so funny,
Yeah.
like, to me, that I see that happen because over and over in my career, and I'm sure you've seen this too, right? Like, the times that you're willing to say, hey, mea culpa, this is something I'm responsible for, needs work, or I need to pivot, or I need to do something different, or whatever. Like, that's when you get all your credibility, is by doing that. Like, it's not, I mean, yes,
When you actually
right.
fix the thing that needed to be
When
fixed.
you're right all the time and you deliver early all the time, like, yeah, sure, that stuff gives you credibility too. But also, like, being able to say the hard thing honestly and then fix it, to your point.
Yep.
Like, I don't understand. It's not courageous. It's easy. It's the smart thing to do. Like, I don't get it why people are so scared of it. It blows my mind. So
But
it's,
I think that also speaks to cultures where people are punished for bringing light to problems that need to be fixed, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are certain companies where people want everything to just be glossed over, and then the quality just degrades over and over and over again, right?
yeah, I think I might just be I think I might have just had a strange career because I just haven't ever worked in that type of environment. Because I think either they naturally didn't want me because they knew that I would be somewhat allergic and probably cause problems, or vice versa. But yeah, no, it's never been my thing. I what's the guy say? He says, like, don't hide things in the fog. Like, that's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite sayings. Like, just don't ignore problems because they only get bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it comes from being entrepreneurial as well. I think if you are the kind of person that has maybe been at a safe job for decades and you've been able to kind of like hide in a cubicle, maybe it isn't as obvious to you to be like, hey, when something's on fire, it's really important to say, this is on fire. We got to put it out. Here's how we're going to put it out. Right.
Yeah.
But I think when you have to, like, if something isn't good, you don't pay your bills. Like, that's a different kind of setup, right? So living that way for a long time, I think I'm like you, like, I can't see a problem now and not be like, well, that sucked. Why don't we do something about it? Right.
Yeah. No, I remember, I think I've talked about it before on the podcast. Like, when I was at Bank of America for a long time, kind of came up at B of A, and then, and I didn't realize how insular working, even though I was pretty ambitious and moving up and doing all those things. And like, I felt like I was plugged in and all that. And then when I got out of there and I was working at, 100 person that grew into a 400 person company in a couple of years, like, the difference in awareness of what's going on in the business, in the overall market, and all those different things was so dramatic. And it was very interesting for me to think back on and realize how little my world was inside of a place like B of A. It's
Right.
which
You're so
it's like,
compartmentalized, right?
yeah, exactly. Like, you're in a big house. But you never look outside your house, and really you never look outside your room of your house. And so it's like, I think, to your point, I think there's a lot of people that kind of, that's their life and that's their career, and they don't, they kind of focus on the stuff they're told to focus on, and they don't really break out of that. So
they don't make waves because making waves is bad, but
Yeah.
in that role, like, you told me, like, you're going to need to go in and make waves to make this better. And I kind of like went and ran with it, maybe in some ways too much. But
Well, it depends on
it
who
was
you
great.
ask. I was thrilled, and my boss was thrilled, and his boss was thrilled. So I guess
That's
that's
all that counts.
and
That's all that
and I
matters.
know a lot of engineers thought highly of you guys as well and the work that you did. So let's get into some
That's
of the
great.
technical stuff, right? Like,
Sure.
so you mentioned I've been dying to talk about this. I've half talked about it on like 3 podcasts coming up to this. One of our kind of key, call it, I don't know, accomplishment, I guess, in our time together at that bank was transitioning them from a centralized single app native stack to a componentized React Native, system.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the decision. Like, how do we get? I mean, I guess you sort of got handed this decision. You didn't really get a say, but like, let's pretend for a minute that the decision wasn't already made, and you think about if somebody's out there trying to decide, do we keep going the native path or do we, go to React Native? What's some of the reasoning behind it? Like, how, if somebody called you up and said, "Hey, Aptitude, we want you to consult, come pay, we'll pay $500 an hour to come sit here and help us make this decision." Like,
Right.
how would you go? Walk me through that process.
I think in 2025, you start with React Native, which is a huge difference, right? From 14 years ago. You, because it makes sense to do it with React Native, and there has to be a very specific justification for doing a native app solely native now, right? Like, okay, maybe
Interesting.
you only want to work on iOS, which I think is a very rare occurrence these days, but maybe like there's this app called Things that I use for to-do lists
Yeah, I know
for
things.
forever, and it's a very Apple native app. And for whatever reason, they just have always kept it iOS only, Apple only, Mac only. So maybe that's just your jam, right? And if that's the case, that's great. Do it in Switch UI, do it iOS only, do it native, and then you're going to have the best user experience you possibly can because you're writing it in that native format. But the second you decide that you need to support two platforms, or you need to modularize things out and support disparate teams, and that starts to get to be disorganized and becomes a bit of a mess. Repos or a pain. You're going to start to look at different options, right? And especially in 2025 now with React Native, you can't make the argument that it doesn't feel native. And that was the argument I used to make. Like
Mm-hmm.
if somebody writes a React Native app or a cross-platform app hybrid, I can tell. I can always tell. Like I can scroll through it and see. But I would say, around 2021, 2020 is when the tide started to shift there. And now, like, they've done such a great job with making the app feel natural, with making it feel native, with making sure the user experience is pretty much the same. Now, you can do it, you can code it lazily and make it so that it feels like it's a web page. But
You
for the
can build
most part,
something crappy in either approach. Yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
Exactly. You could build a crappy native app. But for the most part, you're going to be able to utilize JavaScript, which is a much less heavy lift. And you're going to be able to utilize the React system with components and everything that they've started to kind of go back and with Swift UI and with Jetpack Compose kind of put into these native platforms. They've kind of taken the example from React, right? But I think that's why people love React, and the staying power of React is that, one, JavaScript, two, components, and three, they built this community and this ecosystem around React native that I think is unbeat. Like Flutter doesn't have the same kind of community, right? How
Yeah.
many people are programming in Dart? So I think it's specifically the the power that Meta has put behind React Native as a platform, open source, right? The community that's sprung up around it, the fact that JavaScript has, this massive community in general, and you're able to kind of stand on the shoulders of all these giants with an NPM package. And then with React just being kind of a really well designed tool, right? I think it all comes together pretty well.
I
So
think there's a
the decision to do something in React Native, I think you start in 2025. If I was advising, somebody at Aptitude on what we would want to do, I would start with React Native. And then if you're making a game, if you're making something that is like really relies on the camera, like surgical precision kind of stuff that you need feedback from the camera at all times, those might be considerations you still want to do a native app. But other than that, I mean, you're going to get close to native performance and native user experience from a React Native app, and you're going to be able to push it out to Android if and when you decide you want to do that.
So yeah, I'll build on that, right? So I think I agree with everything you said. I also kind of glossed over it, right? Like React, I mean, anything that's been around and been as big as React has been, there's plenty of haters and they have good arguments and all this sort of things. But
Sure.
but the Flux was it Flux? Yeah, Flux model that they originally put out with React, and then eventually is kind of this unidirectional data flow model was clearly the winner, right? Like it just became, it was React and Angular, and then everybody started using React and like, oh God, this is way better. And and it was a very
Way
interesting
better
thing.
dev experience.
Yeah. And now you see it, like to your point, they started to bake it into everything, right? Basically every platform is doing that. But, and the other thing I'll mention is, the type of apps that most enterprises are building. To your point, you have no need of native, right? The React Native stuff has gotten good enough. Our devices are powerful enough. And frankly, you're all just building a bunch of tables and views anyways. Like, what do you care, right? Like you're not trying to your point, like project a hologram out of your screen or some crazy thing, right? Like it's not,
Right.
it's not necessary. So, and the cost of applications, the maintenance and the dev cost and all those different things, from a business standpoint, it makes total sense. Because if you got, especially like, so we're in the banking space. I know you're running a big mobile shop at a large healthcare organization now, right? Like the stuff you're doing in mobile, you generally have to do in the web as well.
Sorry,
right? And so, sorry about that. And, so you've got 3 platforms you've got to support. By using React, it's not like you get 100% copy of the code everywhere. Like it varies from experience to experience and all those different things. But you could put your service layer can all be shared, right? Like, and there's just a lot of things that can be shared, and the efficiency of that is just really, really good.
It's absolutely. And I think that was the thing is like a lot of people had made that promise, right? Like Ionic had made that promise. There are other ones that have come and gone, and they said like, oh, do everything in HTML and it'll feel great. And it clearly never delivered. But React was the first one where it actually delivered on the promise. Like, oh no, you can actually make this happen, support 3 platforms at once with the same code base. Yeah. And it'll actually like produce dividends, right? Like I think statistically, when you switch to React Native, the size of mobile teams reduced by 40%. So, you don't have to, you literally don't have to have 2 people doing the same feature, 2 different code bases every time. And it actually plays out the way you advertise it, right?
Well, and so that organization, this was a subset of a larger technology strategy that my boss and I had been pushing, right? Like, not only were we trying to move into React Native, we were also componentizing with our own design system, and we were also transitioning to Node.js on the back end, right? So instead of having
like everywhere, right?
The JavaScript everywhere was a big part of the strategy, and also that allowed, to your point, not necessarily fewer devs, but allowed for a lot of velocity and fungibility, right? Because now you can have one team of 2 or 3 people can do the whole thing. They can write the APIs, they can write the UI for the web, Android and iOS. You didn't need specialty people there doing that. And frankly, I mean, it worked really, really well. I mean, to your point, it increased our velocity like crazy. It allowed, because the cool thing about that, when you have that situation, the number of people that have to become subject matter experts in the business area, in the business domain, let's say your minimum is 3 on any team, and if you have to have 3 different teams, it's 9 people, right? Well, trying to keep 9 people coordinated is a hell of a lot harder than 3, right? And so just the
Absolutely.
efficiency from that alone and the ability to move and make decisions and all those different things, especially also
Yeah.
because those people are all in their own little camps, right? We're the Java backend guys, we're the Android guys, we're the whatever.
Right.
And that they all had their own little things, but then we were able to make the teams cross-functional because the tech was so much more, and that's where the tech was so much more fungible. And that's also where the platform team became so much more important because a lot of that deep expertise moves into the platform team, right? The deep native expertise doesn't need to scale, right? You need it in your platform layer where they're going to manage the plumbing, as we would call it, right? Like,
Right.
and that type of stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point. On a platform team, a mobile platform team, you do need good native talent. You do need people that know what to do when things blow up. And, if I'm a web dev that transitioned over to React Native, maybe I don't have the same, compiler background as a native dev. So when you have that deep talent on the platform team, which we had some really great native guys there too, right? You have that ability to kind of push things forward, but also fix them when they explode, right?
Yeah, totally. So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? Like that was mess. It was messy, right? Like it was not popular, right? And we kind of went about it the way you go about these things, right? Like, so we sort of experimented. We did a little skunk works. We did a little this, a little that. And then, and then the first time we tried to merge in, because what we were basically going to do is we'd started componentizing in the native space, right? And we weren't starting from scratch because we've just seen too many times that, and you'll hear this strategy from me, like people that ask about replatforming. I am a strangler. Like I do not believe in start over from scratch. I've seen it fail too many times. It's too hard. And it's too easy of an answer that never really pans out is sort of my response. Engineers love it because they love to drop the baggage and start over, but it's too hard to be successful in my experience. So what we were doing
in an organization, right? Like when you're trying to get an organization to get behind a rewrite and all of that knowledge that went into that code base and everything, you're starting over. Like so many things go wrong. So you're absolutely right. Like I remember on your slides a lot, you would always have like strangle the monolith. And that, was kind of the mantra, right? But absolutely, I think personal projects, small projects, you want to rewrite? Absolutely. I've gotten so many benefits from doing rewrites in certain things at a certain scale. But in an organization, a large organization, Fortune 500 company, no, you don't want to do a rewrite unless you absolutely have to.
So the last time that I was involved in a hard rewrite like that was, and it was just the mobile app. It wasn't even the backends. It was at Passport, right? Like I was VP of engineering and I kind of came in. It was already like a year-long project when I came in. And I'm not even sure we actually had fully had it out the door by the time I left the company, right? Like it was just, it was brutal, right? Just a death march. And so, in retrospect, I just, that I learned a lot from that one. You just never, it's just too hard because the problem is, when like in that app in particular, you had millions of people using it every day. Right. And that app had what you would call a long tail situation, right? Like there was just a lot of little edge cases and each individual customer. So if you think about like, they kept adding new customers and each time they'd have to tweak something to make it work for that customer. And then now all of a sudden you've got this massive base of things. And, oh, by the way, it's all new people writing it and nobody really knows where those bodies are buried. And the thing just got dragged down in QA forever. Right. And so,
I think that's another great example. Like that's why Apple's struggling so mightily with Siri and with integrating AI into Siri because of that exact problem, right? So many different edge cases, so many different situations that they had to kind of bolt on that are very specific. And then when you approach a rewrite, you're like, okay, now we're going to have to relearn all of those lessons in a new way. It's just going to be a nightmare, right?
Well, and that's actually the good counterfactual, right? Like, or the good counterpoint, right? Like sometimes the rewrite is necessary because you need a reset. And it is mental. It is, no, if we don't do it, this will pollute the new thing. Right. Yeah. And those types of things like that.
Systemic, right?
Yeah, like it's a cultural thing, and and so sometimes you need that. But I would strongly argue that generally it's not the right thing to do. So like we didn't do that, right? So we went in and we said, okay, hey, we're gonna take this little React Native thing. We figured out how to just plug it into the main app, and 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 then one of the native devs just closed our PR. It was just like, nope, right? And it was just like, we're not having it, and which of course caused all kinds of mayhem and drama and whatnot. We ended up both you and I ended up becoming good friends with that guy, but at the time it was like, what the hell just happened? But yeah, that was messy. People didn't like it, man. The native, I mean, what was the attrition? It was about 50-60% of the native devs quit over the 6 months, kind of in the key transition.
There's a lot of controversy because I think if you take somebody that has been learning their craft, a very niche specific Swift, Kotlin, Java, Objective-C, whatever, and they've been doing that for 10 years, and then you tell them, hey, you have to drop what you're doing and either learn or start using JavaScript, people are going to revolt against that just based on principle, right?
Yeah.
But
and fair enough, right? I'm not no judgment.
Yeah, and but that's tech, right? Like nobody gets 30 years doing the same thing. If you're using the same thing after 5 years, you should start looking for the new tool. Right?
Well, but that's the thing about I wanted to talk about with mobile, right? Like mobile is kind of unique in this way, right? Like I've always, I'm sure you've heard me sort of like I sort of always used to rant about like B of A had a lot of these guys I would call like they're not software developers, they're J2E developers, right? Like they know their thing and they've been trained very well by the multinationals to do their thing. And that's kind of it. And they can work in the assembly line at their thing, but they're not like polymaths on any level. They can't learn something new and and so those were always the people like, which isn't to say that everybody uses Java is like that. Cause I knew some really smart people that did that.
Sure.
But there was a category of folks that were like that. And they used to always drive me crazy. And I wanted nothing to do with them on my teams. Right. And I think the native guys remind me of that a little bit, right? Because they're the native devs, especially iOS. There's an elitism there, and there's an insular. Like they don't go and learn other stuff. Not all of them, obviously, but maybe half-ish, maybe 60-70% are like, no, I'm not a software engineer. I'm an iOS engineer. Like they identify with the platform, not with writing code and not with building systems. Right. And
absolutely.
it's okay. I mean, it's not the same thing. They're different things.
I don't know if we're in the same world as we are. We certainly aren't in the same world as we are when the iPhone came out. But for the first, 10 years of the iPhone, you would consider it, Apple was still kind of a prestige brand. And I think when you are a developer for a prestige brand and you've learned this thing that, especially initially, was very difficult to learn and to tackle, and you've mastered it and you make apps for this prestige brand, there is a certain amount of your ego gets kind of attached to that, right? So you have guys specifically that are like, I'm an iOS developer, and their ego is kind of attached to that. And to your point about the J2EE developers, it's like, well, okay, that's great for you, but is it great for the company? And over time, I think that answer went from, initially with mobile development. Yes, you need native developers that know iOS really well, that know Swift really well. And over time, it's like, well, no, now the answer really is like, you got to do React Native because that's just what makes sense in 2025 for companies that are doing multi-platform.
Yeah. And even more so with the AI stuff, like changes that game a lot because it's much better at React and those types of things than it is at the Object. Not that it can't do the other things, but it's just better at that.
They trained it so much on React because there's so much there, right?
Yeah, there's just so much more code. Yeah, for sure. All right. So what other, native versus cross-platform, like what other things would you say about executing that type of transition if you're going to do that?
We kind of covered it, but just to underscore it, like you don't want to rewrite, you want to introduce it and grow it, right? You want to start with a feature that you can kind of shim in there and then grow that feature base as gradually as you can, week by week, release by release. And you know me, I'm a big fan of weekly releases. I don't know if they're still doing that at that bank, but
Yeah,
they were releasing like twice a year when I got there,
yeah,
right?
no, it was we've vacillated between different extremes, but
Yeah,
I mean, weekly. The problem with mobile releases is there's just a lot of overhead. Like it's a pain in the butt.
right,
Like
right.
it's one of those things. Like you would kind of you've kind of taken a few pot shots at Apple today, which I kind of find hilarious. But I mean, it is real, right? Like they've gotten so fat and lazy, I think, on some things. The the App Store process, forget the tax and the money and all that stuff, which is a whole other
Right.
ball of wax.
The review
Just
process.
the process is so brutal, right? And so
Hmm.
arbitrary, and so like there's so many things about it that are just broken, and they
And
have
it
no
used to be
real
way
incentive to
worse.
fix it.
Like way worse. Like when I started Aptitude, I mean, you would get just one-shotted by a single review, and then we would all automatically like appeal if we got a rejection, and then sometimes we would just get cleared just by getting
Yeah,
another random guy, right?
yeah,
And yeah, it used to be you had to wait, you would submit, you would wait like a week before it even got reviewed. They've gotten way better, but
yeah. That's
certainly,
true.
yeah, the walled garden thing, right? And I think they set a great example for like how you want to do device third party app development with app store being like a walled garden, and it worked really well for a while. But you know, the Epic Games case, right? Like that just
Mhm.
went against them, and that approach, I think, over time has degraded for everybody.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make sense now, right?
Well, and I think it's interesting, you know, and I know we'll get into some AI stuff, but I always wonder about these types of review processes, like how much more with the large language models can you improve these types of processes that are so manual today, you
Absolutely.
know, and testing and different things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays. Apple's an interesting case for me. Like obviously they have more money than probably any company's ever had in terms of cash balances. Like they're unbelievably successful commercially, and yet they also seem like they've stagnated pretty dramatically. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, do they have something up their sleeve, or are they just kind of
Right.
are they just transitioning to a cash collecting or rent seeking company? Like, are they just hitting that part of the business cycle? You know, who knows?
Are they
It's hard to tell.
are they going to be the Nokia of AI? You know, like
Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I actually posted something today about the AI stuff. I don't know if you saw this, but GitHub just open sourced their whole
VS Code.
Copilot thing. Yeah. Well, VS Code's been
Oh,
open source
really?
forever,
Copilot.
but yeah, Copilot, like you can see like their prompt, like everything. And
Interesting. Okay.
and so the thing I said today, which was, you know, obnoxious and ridiculous, but is like Cursor is probably one of my favorite products I've ever used. Like it's amazing. At the same time, if I could short their stock today, I probably would. Right? Like
Yeah.
I don't see, like it's great, but everything that's great about it is copyable, and the GitHub integration and whether or GitLab or whomever it is, whatever the system
Yeah.
you're using, and ultimately it's just a wrapper around the models and stuff. And again, it's great.
Right.
I'm not trying to hate on those guys. Like I'm happy they're successful.
Right.
I want them to be successful. I hope that in 2 months they're not either bankrupt or acquired, or in 2 years, I mean. But it's like they have like 500 million. I forget the numbers. I'm getting it wrong, but like 500 million ARR. They have a 40-person team, and yet they need to raise $800 million. Like something doesn't add up, and all this other stuff. So I mean, it's really interesting. I love the AI stuff. It's really interesting. I'm also wondering like when's the shoe going to drop on some of the BS that's flying around. And I know you're a big
I
Altman
think
fan, but I also think that's the epicenter of the BS too. So it's hard. Although I got to say, the drama between Sam and Zuck is fun to watch.
Zuck.
Like
It's
this is
absolutely heating
interesting.
up. Yeah.
It is.
$100 million
It's.
payouts. Like,
I mean, I don't
wow.
believe that. So here's the theory on that. Right, Altman said that
To
because
make
first of all,
it harder for
Altman
people
has
to-
zero fidelity to the facts in reality. Right, like he
Right.
is a master salesman that is a storyteller, and we all know you should never let the facts get in the way of a good story. And so Sam has embodied that. Whether you see him as a as a hero or a villain, I think we can all agree that's who he is. And
Sure.
and I think what he's doing in that story is saying, one, he's making Zuck out to be like this evil billionaire that's just throwing his money around. But also, two, if they now approach somebody and try to pay him $2 million a year, they'll be like, what the hell? I wasn't worth your
Why are you
100 million.
lowballing me?
Yeah. And then also, like, the people that are still at Meta are going to, like, he's trying to sow dissent there and stuff. So it's very clever in that respect.
Right.
Or maybe it's true. Maybe there is somebody they offered that to, some like genius math dude, but whatever. It wasn't me. I tell you that.
There's an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it came out today, and it's about how Zuck has a hit list of 100 people in AI that he's going just like down one by one and just, promising them, their own planet, that kind of thing. And he's like reading AI papers, and they're trying to figure out like what's the best way to reach out to them. Like some of these guys only talk on WhatsApp, but there's apparently like 3 people in this WhatsApp chat that he's just, and they called it recruiting party with a little like celebration emoji. But it's a really fascinating article in the Wall Street Journal. You should check it out.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know what to make of all that. The AI stuff I'm enjoying being a consumer of it, and we are trying to help with it and our customers the best we can. But it is, I think we're, like we've seen with the last few waves where there was the internet, mobile, crypto. I think there's going to be some bodies that are going to get burned up along the way, but we'll get some value out of it. I mean, we still haven't really gotten value out of crypto, but it's coming. I think the stablecoin stuff is cool. Stablecoins is fun.
You're not using Web3. You're not doing things on Web3, dude. Come on,
dude. My problem is like I don't get. For being kind of a hype master in my own little bubble, like I don't get hyped about those things, and I just think like this is stupid. Like I have a friend or a guy I used to work with. I like to think of him as a friend. I'm not sure if he thinks of me as a friend, but and he went nuts on the NFT stuff. Like he made so much money, he had to move to Puerto Rico to like with his wife to like get the tax burden down. Like he was just raking in cash, and I'm just sitting there like, I mean, I realize people are making money off of this, but I just don't get it. I think it's all BS. Like, what are we talking about? It's like, no, it's going to be the future. Like, and they're like, so like they believe their own hype. And I'm just like, it's just, now he walked away with however many numbers of millions of dollars. And I'm, right. I may have been right, but he won. Right. So like, that's kind of how I look at some of these things. Like I still can't take action unless I understand it. That's sort of my, like, I'm not just going to throw money after the hype, but like I'm happy for people that win.
There's so many different things that pop up all the time. Right. And I'm in it right now with AI. Like I had to write, this job that pulls out academic AI papers and trends and GitHub repos that are AI related just so I can keep up, right? But like, I think there's so many things going on in tech at all times, and there's so many trends that when you hear something and you're like, you get so kind of inundated, you just kind of become numb to it, right?
Yeah.
I did the same thing with like Bitcoin. Like everybody was talking about Bitcoin in 2012, whenever. And I remember being like, whatever. And, if I had, put down $100 when that happened, right? But I think you have to have rules, right? You have to have a threshold. Like I have a threshold for, should I care about this? And I have certain people in the industry that I trust, both people that are just public figures and people like you that I trust internally that I actually know. And it's like, okay, if 3 of people from that sphere have mentioned this thing, this tool, this website, this LLM, that kind of thing, then I start paying attention. But otherwise,
it becomes signal and not just noise. Yeah.
Right. But you have to have kind of a framework, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, we all have those models. So what are you excited about? Like what, this from interviews, because you've watched me do enough interviews. Like one of my favorite things to ask is like, what's exciting for you right now? Like it could be, I know you got some personal news. I'm not sure if that's for the podcast or not, but like, what's we're talking about AI. Like, what's exciting for you, and what's going on in 2025? What are you excited about for 2026 and beyond?
Yeah. Well, personally, I'm getting married. Just
Woohoo!
got engaged to the love of my life, Sarah. So that's like definitely my number one thing I'm most excited about.
Excellent.
Two, I am launching a new company called Agentive. You
Nice.
can find us on agentivloop.com. And I think agents are going to be a big thing. I've been saying this. You've heard me say this. I think agents are the new app. And you're going to have people that need agent development for their company just so they can connect to everybody's favorite chatbot. ChatGPT, what's my bank balance? That kind of thing. So doing something with Agentive similarly in the way I did with Aptitude in 2012, helping people build these agents, that gets me really excited.
Cool.
And I think the definition of an agent is both changing and it's kind of multi-tiered, right? Like a lot of what people are calling agents right now is basically like a workflow.
It's just a workflow.
But
Yeah. It's like
right, but where it
that's
gets
basically
really,
you just business process automation, buddy. Like, what are we talking about here?
absolutely, ops guys are like, what is this? I've been doing this for 10 years. But where it gets really interesting and where it gets really agentive is when you pull LLMs into the loop and you let them make autonomous decisions. And
Yeah.
that's where it goes from being a workflow to something new that I think is really cool. But yeah, I'm in like both ChatGPT and Claude all day long. I have like processes and flows that I use with them, especially with Claude Code. You've heard me kind of sing praises about that. I think
Yeah, how is that versus Cursor? Like, I haven't actually played with. I actually obviously use the Claude models in a few different places, but the Anthropic models. But I don't actually use Claude Code. What have you played with it in comparison to like a Cursor or Copilot?
I have. I've used Cursor. I've used Copilot, Windsurf. I've used all of them. I think Claude is the one to beat. And
Interesting.
the Anthropic team that developed Claude said that they think they're always a little too optimistic, but they said within a year the concept of an IDE is going to look dated. So they designed Claude Code
Anthropic likes to say shit. Like, those guys throw all kinds of like. I'm so sick of the hype from the guys selling like.
the guy
Man,
selling
it's like
the Kool-Aid.
yeah, for sure. Like whether it's Altman or the Anthropic guys, they're so like AI is everything. Oh, so happens that we're raising a few $1 billion right now.
AI.
Of course, that's going to be the case. Like, you're the most
absolutely.
Unreliable person ever to make these predictions.
Very, very true. But
Doesn't mean they're wrong, of course. It's just it's annoying.
I started off this year being very much in the camp of like, I'm, in technology in the developer world, and this clearly is going to change how we do things as developers, right? So I kind of started off 2025 professionally wanting to make sure that I got to as close to the bleeding edge as I wanted to and felt more comfortable with it. And so I've really dived into all of those tools. And I think Claude Code is the best one. You, especially when you know what you're doing. Like I told you my flow, right? Like you create a PRD, and then you turn that PRD into a development plan, and you go feature by feature, and you really start mapping it out. And just like working on a project that has a lot of people that actually know what they're doing, like you could just say like, hey, build me a mobile app in Claude Code, and you'll get a certain level of output. But when you go into detail and you have specific structures and requirements, just like in real life with a development team, the more requirements you have and the more documentation you have, the better you get.
So I've done a couple of things recently. Well, so there's two different categories of things. One, I had to rewrite one of our integrations from Node into Go because we use this library, and their JavaScript SDK was all jacked up, and it wasn't working right with a large data set, and I couldn't get them to believe me. I'm like, guys, I'm reading your SDK, you're not doing it right. Like, there's a problem. I can't quite tell what you're doing, but like, I know it's not like, here's where the problem is and here's how you replicate it. But like, I just didn't have time to wait. So I rewrote it in there using their Go SDK, and it worked great. I didn't write a line of it. So now this is a little different situation because I had a brand new, fresh thing written in integrating with this one product in Node, and then I basically walked Cursor through transitioning it all to Go. And I mean, it took me 24 hours, like not straight working on it, but like for my I'm doing a lot of different things, but back and forth, and I had it working, and it was great. So like that's a really cool thing. Again, back to the cross-platform stuff, like being opinionated about what technology you're using these days is stupid. Right? Like, it just doesn't make sense because
even more so now, right?
Yeah. I mean, MK and I have had this conversation. Like, we're doing the same thing. He got me to write some Python, and I hate Python, but it's like,
Python's awesome.
it was the right tool for the thing that we were trying to do. Wanted to use glue, and it's like, you can't write glue except for with Python.
Right.
I got to figure it out. So, but I like with the tools, I'm like, fine. Like, I figure, like, I can't read. Like, Go is hard for me to read. Like, I'm not that bright. I look at it and I'm like, what is going on? I'm a JavaScript guy. I like TypeScript. But with the LLMs, it's super easy. And the other thing I was going to say is, it's interesting. You talk about like building out this context to build your app. See, I've always coded differently than that. Like I've worked with guys that sort of one shot things. Like, they sit there and they write their tests and they press button at the end of the day, and it works. Like, I'm like, write test. Like and that's how I kind of work with the AI. Like, I don't give it big instructions. I give it incremental instructions and then operate against it and then evolve on it. So it's interesting to see.
You want to do it like with Claude Code or with anything really, because the context window, like, you want to do it piece by piece, bit by bit. You don't want to have it do everything all at once, right?
So let me ask you this: when you're doing, so this is the other thing I'm using it for. So I'm doing design work with it because obviously I'm not a designer at all, and I don't work well with designers. They all end up getting mad at me because, and my wife's a
designer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the thing is, she's the only, like, honestly, she's like, just have me come, because she can translate what I'm trying to say into actual human speak. But for some reason, like, I just really, really struggle communicating effectively in design.
Yeah.
And I'm not very visually imaginative, right? Like, I have very little visual imagination. It's one of my favorite quotes from a movie is like, I forget which one it was, but it was essentially like, it's from my wife's favorite movie called A Good Year. And he said, the quote was, God made beautiful women for men with no imagination, or with little imagination. And so that's why I married who I married, because I'm not very creative. I had to find something that was beautiful already. But it's interesting, like, doing design work with it. So I took like a screen that I wanted to enhance, right? Like, so we had a screen in DevGrid.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I want to add more data to the screen, right? Like, it's a little, like, we could do more here. And so I took a screenshot, went into Cursor, and I took a screenshot, opened up the components and stuff in Cursor, and I just started telling it what I wanted, like I would tell a designer. Yep. And I just iterated. And I'm also doing this now in Figma, because Figma's make tool is kind of the same thing. And it's interesting because it's writing code under the covers, all using Anthropic stuff. It's much slower than doing it in Cursor, because I think Cursor is just better at writing code. And so it's more targeted and all those different things. But
right.
But it's also cool because they have like a built-in web hosting to it too. So it's really easy to share and like get input and some of those types of things. So I kind of go back and forth between those, but I was curious, do you do any, because I tried to use, Google launched something, I forget what it's called now, but every time I went that would generate screens for you and you could iterate with, but it just broke every time I tried to use it. So
I'm trying to like surreptitiously look up this tool, because I just found this tool yesterday called Looka, Looka. And I'm getting ahead of myself. Is that the question I think you're going to ask me? Is, have I used any of the like AI?
Yeah, I'm just
tools?
I'm curious. Like, what are you doing? Like, when you're like, if you're going to sit down and build something. Yep. I mean, obviously, if you're doing agentic stuff, that's less UI. But as a guy coming from a strong mobile background, you have a very aesthetic, a very kind of high bar for aesthetics. And so,
absolutely,
how do you leverage AI in that process? I guess is what I'm asking.
I think I haven't used the Figma tool that you mentioned, but I think that's very smart with Figma to go in that direction because they really have kind of taken the helm of the front of the way designers work, right? Like every designer I know works in Figma, sends you mockups in Figma, and that's where it goes. So that also means they have tons of training data for good design, right? So that's pretty awesome to hear that they're working on a product and that it seems to be going well. I haven't found a product that does design well yet. I don't know if you've ever asked. Like, so ChatGPT really nailed it with their image generation stuff recently. Like,
it was amazing before they put all the restrictions in. Like for like 12 hours, it was so cool.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. But if you ever ask Claude to generate an image, it's usually like the most ridiculously bad thing you've ever seen because he can basically only draw an SVG. So imagine like a developer trying to like design something and it's just absolute garbage. But I haven't found anything visually that does that, but I know they're on the horizon. I played with Adobe Photoshop's AI tools trying to do some stuff where I needed like, I had this image of a family crest and I needed to change something in the family crest very specifically. And it was garbage, absolute garbage. One of the worst things I've ever seen.
Yeah. There's a reason Adobe wanted to buy Figma.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I'll have to check it out. But I think right now what I've been doing is getting visual identity stuff down by working with LLMs to be like, okay, here's my vision. You set the roles, like act as a brand product designer, create a brand guideline for this brand. You give a really great prompt, make sure it's suitably prompt engineered for the role that you're giving it. And you usually get some pretty good stuff out, but then you use that either that you could bring to a designer, right? Like a design brief, and have them build off of that design brief, which I've done. I've hired people from Fiverr using design briefs that I've had generated by an LLM. Or you can use, I assume, something like Figma or this tool Looka that I think is pretty promising too.
Cool. Awesome. I just realized we're over an hour now, so we'll stop talking everybody's ear off. For those of you that have kind of stuck around with us, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just to kind of re-summarize, what did we hit, right? Like we talked about the mobile dev shop and platform engineering in mobile and some of the key takeaways there, I think are, if you're going to have a big mobile shop, you need somebody that cares for the whole app. And that's kind of a very important role. Native versus cross-platform.
I think they have to have, leadership ability, right? You have to have somebody that has a strong personality, that can communicate well, that knows their stuff with mobile, right? They can't be phoning it in. They can't be a web guy that just kind of got thrown into that role.
What are you trying to say?
That wasn't a reference to anything.
We're not going to go down there. We're not going to have that baggage brought up here. We're a family show.
But
no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, like you want to make sure that the people that are running the platform can effectively affect change in the platform, right? That's critical because people are going to fight them all day long.
And React Native's got to be the default. That's the other takeaway. Like if you need a really strong technical reason to not use React Native at this point in the calendar.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
Cool.
And React Native has gotten so good, especially in 2025, that I don't think it makes sense for most apps to not do it in React Native.
Awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Boyd. This is Chris Boyd.
Yeah.
Find him at agentivloop.com. We'll try to put it in the notes as well.
Yeah. I'm excited.
I'm excited to see what you do. Like I only found out about this a couple days ago, so it's pretty cool. And check it out there. And you got any socials or anything you want anybody to talk to you on?
Just go to chrisboyd.me. That's where I keep all my stuff.
Awesome.
So all my links are there. chrisboyd.me.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see you.
Take care.
Yeah.
That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Council, brought to you by DevGrid. Thanks for joining us as we dive into building smarter solutions for the enterprise. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and share your thoughts on X, at DevGrid Inc., or at devgrid.io. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore more ways to thrive in the enterprise. Until then, keep building.